everyone. It is once again my distinct pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to our third webinar. Ladies and gents, when something starts off, when it's a first, it is very exciting. When there's a second time or a repeat of that first, it is a strengthening of that. But when it happens a third time, it gives a sense of permanence. And so, ladies and gents, this is the third of our webinars. And I want to say that I feel so confident that this series of webinars is not going to be 3 or 6, but it's going to be an ongoing series of discussions and events that we're going to have. So I really welcome everyone here today. We have a wonderful, wonderful program. We have changed the format a little bit to encourage and to give more time for discussions and interactions. And we're looking forward to a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. I have also the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Cynthia Motsi, who is from the Agricultural Research Council. I wanted to mention that we are already engaged with the Agricultural Research Council regarding agroecology, our work related to industrial hemp, also with waste management. But today it is so important that Dr. Cynthia Motsi, who is currently the Senior Manager of Intellectual Property Management and Commercialization at the Agricultural Research Council and has experience in management and the commercialization value chain. This is so important and the timing is so good. And I just wanted to say that in the last few weeks, being exposed to a number of symposia, events and discussions, the timing of something is so important. And I cannot think of topics that are being presented today that are more appropriate in terms of both the demand and the need. And so we are so excited to welcome Cynthia, and I'm just got a message to say that Cynthia may be a bit delayed, so I will perhaps introduce her directly later, but we are looking forward to her joining us. But in the meantime, I am going to introduce Dr. Shante Botha, who, as you all know, those of you who have joined us before, was one of our main speakers and panelists at the second web. And so we are also, this is a wonderful example of our flexibility and Shante moving from a speaker into our moderator today. I know Shante personally, although we've only met a couple of times, but we've got full confidence in Shante. You're fulfilling a different kind of role of keeping us all on track and of introducing our different speakers. So I wish you all a wonderful afternoon and webinar, and we look forward to some really exciting presentations. Thank you very much. Shante, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Rudolph. Good afternoon to everyone. I hope you're as excited as I am on a very important topic, in terms of funding and financing and how do we get market ready in terms of that. So I'm personally very excited to listen to all the speakers today. So thank you so much for everyone that's here. I'd just like to, before we get started, just to kind of explain more or less how it's going to work. I will introduce the speakers as we go along, and then we'll have briefly 1 or 2 questions after each speaker. We will take a few questions from the audience. So you will see you can send your questions in the chat function, and then we will ask the speakers to address them. We will try our best to answer all of the questions. We know that you are very engaging audience, which is great. And then right at the end, we will have a dedicated section for questions and answers. So we will really try our best to get to your question, but please do participate using the chat function and ask whatever is on your mind. All right, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So we're really going to start off by looking at tackling the challenges in agri-finance, so really see how we can address it. And then we're going to move into the journey to becoming investment ready. I think that's a very important topic. And then we're going to look at finance and funding. So we really have an interesting lineup. So our first speaker is Tatiana Donde. So I would just like to briefly introduce her. So she's the Chief of Party for the Feed the Future Rwanda, Kungahara Wagura Amosoku. She's a seasoned executive with extensive knowledge in developing and implementing sustainable inclusive growth models for the agriculture sector in East and Southern Africa. And she's passionate about facilitating sectoral investment and improving smallholder livelihoods. So with that being said, we're really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm handing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shante. It's a pleasure to be with you. Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from Kigali, Rwanda. I think I'll go straight into my presentation. So I'll ask that the team puts it up and we can delve into it. I was personally very excited to have the opportunity to speak to you as entrepreneurs in agriculture about how we can tackle the challenges in agriculture finance. And you'll notice that from today's presentation, I want us to dwell less on what is not working, thinking that banks will need collateral or they need this kind of statements, to really understanding what do we need to do as business people for our business to be able to move the needle in regards to access to finance. It is normally said, especially in the agriculture sector, that there's more money than there are good deals. And so today I want us to think about how is your business being cultivated to be a good deal for an investor. And then my friend Poster will take it to the next level in his presentation, looking at what are the kinds of capital you should be looking at and where is your business vis-a-vis how you can attain that capital. So let's go to the next slide because I'm talking to business people. Let's make sure we are understanding each other. Number one, there's a tendency that when you're in the agriculture sector, running a business, you tend to think your business is about impact. I'd like to remind you that just the fact that it is called a business, it means that you should be providing goods and or services in exchange for money, and that your goal should be to become profitable. So whether you're an SME in agriculture, production, or agriculture, agro-processing, please remember that number one, before you're in agriculture, you're a business. So you have to present and you have to look at your business in line of profitability. Why is profitability important? That's the fuel of your business. That's the way you're going to survive. That's how you're going to thrive. And to a good extent, that's how you'll be able to be sustainable. So even if a donor wants to put in patient money in your business, for them, they want you to be sustainable, and profitability is what sustains you. So for a long time, profit has always been the bottom line of any business. So when you're talking to funders, they'll ask you what's your bottom line. The first bottom line will always be profit or your way to profitability. So some of you are in nascent businesses. You might break even in a few months or a year and a half. That is okay, as long as in your vision as an entrepreneur, profitability is running. In my next slide, you will see that now in conversations as a business, you have to be holistic. So number one, still be profitable. Number two, you have to care about the people. So this is where we call social impact. And for a long time, I think some businesses look at impact more from an outward. I'm sourcing from farmers. I am doing this to this group of people. But remember your sustainability or the profitability, the people angle of your business. Sorry, sorry, just go to the slide before. The people angle of your business is how you treat your own employees, how you treat your farmers, and where you're sourcing from, that you're sourcing fairly. So it is 360 within your organization and outside of your organization. And then thirdly, your third bottom line is to care about the planet. You're in agriculture, and we appreciate that global warming and climate change affects our businesses most. So we need to care about how we are caring for an environment. So this is where you talk about how your business is managing waste, how it's recycling, how you're managing issues around climate. So in the next slide, I'd like us to look at what are financiers really looking at when you're talking to them as you prepare yourself to say, I need capital and I need to find it. Number one, you have to be very clear about your business model. So the business model looks at how you're making your money or how you're achieving your profitability. Who are you serving? How are you serving them? Where is your input coming from? At what price is your market buying? All that, including your team, that's your business model. So number one, remember, any financier, even if you're an impact business, looks at financing the model. The model is what says what you are doing. Inside that model, there's something we call the value proposition. So the value proposition is, for example, if you're a consultant, seeking business, my input is data, it's research. How I add value in my business model is turning that into a strategy, into a business plan, whatever value you're adding, and your output is being able to get money for that. Now, in that, you have to talk about your value proposition. Very few businesses are entirely unique, like never been seen before. So even if your business is agro processing, what is your unique selling position in that business? And then lastly, remember that you have to layer your business model with your value proposition and then talk about your revenue model. I'll buy this for this amount, I will process it for this amount, and then I will sell it, or it will go into the market for this amount. Your revenue model is actually what pays back an investor. So you can have a very good business model, but you're having a challenge with the revenue side. Maybe you're not balancing your debtor and your creditor days, and therefore you have a bit of a capital problem, but it doesn't mean you have a bad business. It just means there's a mismatch, which happens especially when you're a young business. But as long as you have a model that can generate revenue, a funder will be interested in looking at you. So in the next slide, I want us to look at what are some of the challenges that I have encountered, especially supporting youth-led businesses. Number one, most businesses or most business owners are not very clear about their bottom line. Most of them would assume, because they are talking to an impact investor, that their bottom line should only be impact. I am working with farmers, I am sourcing from farmers. That is beautiful, but we want you to be able to serve those farmers in a long term, for the longest term possible. So you must start with your profitability, bottom line, your aim of being profitable, then layer it with other aspects. Talk about your business model and your business proposition. Another thing I've noticed, especially in agriculture, is that as an entrepreneur, you don't really understand your capital need. You don't need to know the name of the capital you want. For example, you don't really need to know whether you need working capital, debt capital, or equity, because when you're speaking to a funder, based on how you describe your capital need, they'll be able to know the category of capital you're looking for. So for example, if you say, I really need capital to buy a machine, because when I buy a machine, I will produce X amount more, that makes sure I sell X amount more and make X amount of profit, then they know you need asset finance. If you're like, oh, I need this loan because I really need to employ 15 to 20 people to sort things in my factory, they know it's a working capital problem, but it is linked to the need for human capital. Entrepreneurs also need to invest more time in understanding the value chain. One of the things I've realized is that if you are introducing, or your business is focusing, especially to the lower end of the value chain, that means it has touch points with farmers or with farmer organizations. You need to really pay attention on trying to disrupt the social network that is there in our rural communities. So instead of introducing a business that tries to disrupt, you might then be strategic and look at how do you complement and collaborate with the systems on the ground, especially the social networks. And then with time, then you can slowly disrupt that value chain. But when you come in and you just want to disrupt that value chain, then when you're talking to a funder, they know the likelihood of success there will be late. One of the things I'd like to encourage you is to please leverage the experience that you have around you. Most of you will have touch points with other entrepreneurs in the sector or with mentors who are running almost similar businesses. So leverage the knowledge of those who have gone beyond ahead of you, have them in form of mentors, advisors, or board members. Now, the beauty about that is even when you're talking to an investor, the fact that you're youth-led gives the impression that you're nascent, you're new, you're young, you need to learn. You need to show that you are backstopped by people who are knowledgeable and experienced in the sector for which you're looking for finance. I'd also like you to think about how many roles you want to play as an entrepreneur. We appreciate that the costs can be high, but you cannot be the CEO, the gatekeeper, the IT person, everything that you need to be in your business. And likewise, in the value chain, you can also not play all the roles that need your business to support. So for example, I've met entrepreneurs who produce, for example, peanut butter. But to be able to get to the market, they're having a problem with transport. So they decide, okay, I'll produce peanut butter, I'll have a small truck to transport my goods, and I'll have that kind of diversifies and dilutes your business. So please focus, have a high level of focus. Even when you're talking to your funders, be clear about what your role is. What is this thing that you're becoming good at? And then talk about the challenges you're having around the value chain, because then they can link you to other players who can take care of those challenges you're having. Another thing has been lack of documentation. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs who are looking for finance, and I say, okay, bring your financial records, because your financial records, I can like your story, but your financial records, the numbers do not lie. So when the number of things that happen there, sometimes the financial records are non-existent. Sometimes when they are brought, you doubt the integrity. So for example, your sales numbers sit on Excel. Anybody in your company can access that. Anybody can add a zero or remove a zero. So make sure that you're able to produce records that can be trusted, number one. And then number two, be able to also understand the story that your records are saying. And then please, as an SME in agriculture, remember that there's a lot of goodwill coming to support your enterprise, but the trust can only be built by working together. So I see a lot of frustration where entrepreneurs are saying, but you know, I'm doing this, you need to trust me. Trust has to come from working together. So on the next slide, I'd like to divide into three the kind of aspects we need to think about. Number one, when you're thinking about positioning your business, have a narrative. So have an elevator pitch that's about 1 minute. Have a business pitch that's about 3 minutes that talks about your business, your model, your value proposition, and your ask. That is a webinar for another day. Number two, please demonstrate how partnerships are working in your business. Talk about how you're collaborating and how you're leveraging existing knowledge and existing networks. That kind of buys down risk in your pitch, because then you're not trying to do everything. Also, when you're talking about it, please treasure organic growth. Treasure the fact that you envision working with 10,000 farmers, but the reality is you started with 200 last year, and now you're at 350. And between the 200 and 350, these are the lessons you have learned. That statement is invaluable into getting an investor, because it shows that you're patient in growing your business. And then please demonstrate your team strength. Sometimes there's pressure that because you're the one presenting the business, you want to be everything in your business and position yourself strongly. That sometimes actually ends up being a weakness in your pitch, because then you're everything in your business, but you need to have succession. You need to have leverage other people's knowledge and strength within your team. So please always position teamwork. Now, that's the narrative side of it. The number side of it, as I said, get your house in order. Please keep clean records, make sure they are clear, and have a system that ensures data integrity. Have your financials in Excel, but let that sheet be protected and only managed by 1 or 2 people in the organization. Number second, please always produce and review your financial statements. Here, I'd urge you to take any online course that enables you to understand what your income statement says about your business and what your balance sheet says about the business. You don't need to know how to create the balance sheet and income statement, but at least you need to know what it says about your business to be able to narrate it to somebody else. Please also understand how cash moves within your business, understand your debtor days, your creditor days, because inside there is where your cash flow needs start to happen. And once you understand that, oh, I kind of have to pay farmers immediately, but when I supply to a supermarket, they pay me after 80 days, yet I have salaries, I have electricity to pay monthly, then the need for cash just displays itself. And then when you're working on your projections, please don't always focus on the best case scenario. It is good to be optimistic, but also focus on the worst case scenario. If certain things don't happen, then how do your projections look like? That prepares you and even manages the amount of cash that you're looking to raise. Then lastly, after the number side, look at identifying investors. This is less you because there are a lot of development partners, multilateral, bilaterals who do this for you. They have research looking at who are the funders, what type of capital do they have. And so once you be able to understand the kind of capital you need, then you're speaking to the right person about the kind of capital you look at. Invest in your self-development. I encourage entrepreneurs to do this so that you're just clear about what you're looking for. I've seen entrepreneurs who have shied off having equity investments, but they really need equity investment because they also need technical people on their team to help them with the business. So invest a bit in understanding the difference between working capital with debt, equity, just for your own knowledge, and then shop for the right type of financer. And remember, finance and investment is a symbiotic relationship. Do not get intimidated. When you go in front of an investor and you're looking for capital, they also need to make that deal. So no one is a bigger person in that conversation. You are at par, it's symbiotic. So be confident. You might not know the terms that are used in the industry, but if you understand your business and you can explain your business, you are good. So with that, I'll end my presentation for today. And thank you for paying attention.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that was really, really interesting. And I think, I mean, I'm listening here and I'm making notes. And I think really for me that stood out was, really understand what is it that you're doing, how are you making money? Like you said, that business model is really, really important. And I think I really appreciated, you looked at some of the things that limits access to finance, but you also provided guidance in terms of how to overcome that. So thank you really much for that. And I think it really fits well with the next speaker, looking at the types of financing. As you said, we're not all finance experts. As an entrepreneur, you cover the roles of marketing, IT specialist, HR, everything. So thank you for that. I'm going to take a quick 2 questions. I see there is 2 questions. So the first question is, how does one protect the Excel spreadsheet or financials? Is there like a software that you can use to do this? So that's the first question. And then the second question says, thank you for your insights. I was wondering, what are the most effective ways to improve financial literacy among smallholder farmers in Africa? So I think maybe that's the 2 questions that we currently have.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Actually, on Excel itself, the basic Microsoft Excel, you will be able to password protect your sheet. It's one of the options. I can't remember under what bar it appears. I'll be happy to share that, but that's the simplest way. And so if you're a young business and you're just starting out and you cannot really start investing in softwares, then the Excel sheet actually has a way of being password protected. And what an investor or an auditor wants to know is that not everybody has access to this sheet, and that the data that is in that Excel sheet, your sales, your expenses, is not something that anyone can just come and play around with. It is actually what is happening in the business. And then as you grow the business, there are bespoke kind of software that you buy off the shelf that you can start to use as your business advances, and you become more complex as your business becomes more complex. In terms of smallholder training, I will highly encourage you as entrepreneurs. This is where I said partnership and collaboration. There are so many NGOs in your respective countries whose mandate from the donor is purely financial literacy to smallholder farmers. Please grab them, form a partnership with them, sign an MOU, and let them train smallholder farmers for you. Smallholder farmer training can tend to be very expensive because you have to make the rural reach. You have also to have resources in terms of human resources who's able to talk in every other dialect that they speak in the different areas we are sourcing from. So please leverage partnerships to be able to reach smallholder farmers with the required smallholder farmer training. And the beauty of them is that most of them train and then they do the access to finance linkage. As part of how their training is measured, they need to be able to link these farmers either to a cooperative, a SACCO, a bank, so they also help with that side of the transaction.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. We do have another question. So I want to ask, or someone is asking, how long are you supposed to be in business approximately for you to stand a chance for good investment deals?
Okay, so the rule of thumb for good investment deals, and good is relative, but the rule of thumb is about 3 years. If you can show financial records for 3 years, then they give a financial enough history to be able to trust your projections. But that being said, I have seen businesses that have operated for about 2 years, 1.5 years, and they have been able to prove their business model, that if they're able to get the numbers, they would be profitable. They've been able to show the impact they're creating, the people aspect of it, and therefore they're able to get some level of investment. Sometimes you'll find that investors, for example, will want to put a bigger ticket deal on you. For example, they'll come in and they want to put $1 million. But how they kind of structure that finance is that then they can structure it into 3 phases and they give you milestones that you can achieve. So I would say confidently, if you've run your business, you kept your records, and you're actually doing the business of doing business, 1.5 years into 2 years can give an investor enough confidence, especially when we're talking about angel investors, when we're talking about patient capital in terms of grant, it can give them the level of confidence to show that they want to invest to grow your business.
Thank you so much, Titian. Really, thank you for those insights. I do note there is other questions. We're going to move on for now. We do have a question and answer session at the end, and some of your questions might even be answered with the next speakers as well. So Titian, thank you so much really for your insights. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Prof. Rudolph just to introduce Dr. Cynthia again. Prof. Rudolph.
Hi again, colleagues. I did start introducing Cynthia and I realized she hadn't joined then, but Cynthia, a very warm welcome to you. I was saying, Cynthia, that we already have a relationship with the ARC in terms of the people from agroecology. We are also liaising with the ARC regarding our work with industrial hemp and also waste management at the Irene facility. But it is such a pleasure to welcome you as the Senior Manager of Intellectual Property Management and Commercialization. The timing of commercialization of entrepreneurship and business is absolutely ripe, where there is a huge need and demand. And so your experience and your experience and expertise in these areas are so important and will add huge value to not only today, but hopefully our ongoing efforts to promote agripreneurship and empowering the future of our youth. So again, a hearty welcome, Cynthia, Dr. Cynthia Motzi, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you. Please go ahead, Dr. Cynthia.
Okay, I was talking to myself. Thank you, Prof, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure if my presentation is on a presentation mode. Okay, thank you. As indicated, I'm coming from the Agricultural Research Council, and my presentation for this webinar will be based specifically on IP rights. But as we all know that the smallholder farmers in South Africa plays a very critical role when it comes to food production, accounting to up to 80% of the regional agricultural outputs. One might wonder what kind of the agricultural food production that we are referring to, or where is it coming from? Some of the activities that we are referring to as food production is the material that was developed through research activity, and our organization plays a critical role in developing such activities. And these activities are grouped as intellectual property rights. Yes, I'm aware that we are talking about barriers to agri-finance, but the issue on intellectual property rights actually plays a very critical role when one actually goes out and seek funding. So just as a reminder, or just to share with everybody else, when we talk about intellectual property rights, we are talking about rights such as plant breeders' rights. I'll give an example. The lady that just presented now talked about the peanut butter. Where do we get that peanut butter? We get it from groundnuts. But where do we get those groundnuts? Somebody out there actually develops different types of groundnuts, perhaps the ones that can grow in different climatic areas. So when you are a business person, you would actually look for the material that would be suitable for your environment. If you have those groundnuts, are you reusing them without certifying them? And if you use the material that is actually not certified, are you getting good returns on investment? Because you are competing with other parties. Will the investors look into your books based on what is it that you are bringing into your company? Some of the IP rights that I want to talk about is the copyright one. Do you have your information recorded, or you don't have records of your processes for your production material? Do you have trademarks, or you just have the product, there's no label, and now you want to go and seek for funding? And will the funders be interested to actually assist you in that regard? If you just have a bottle that has been closed, it's not packaged properly, doesn't have a label, it doesn't say much, would that attract the funders? What I want to share is that the intellectual property rights, they actually promote innovation within the agricultural space with the proposition that this will increase the economic gain of any other country, because if our country exports, for an example, citrus that have been planted by smallholder farmers, it means that that export contributes to the GDP of the country. It might be a very minimum amount, but it actually contributes toward that. But also it affects the interest, or it brings in the interest to investors, because now whatever that you have, you are actually now exporting it. And then the second point that I want to say is that it accommodates the interest of well-resourced actors that rather would also look into assist the rural communities. In that, when, for an example, you have the groundnuts that are certified, that have good qualities, you can actually go ahead and then also sell these at the communities. But that, what is it that it is doing to your business? It gives you a good record in terms of your income, so that when you go out and seek funding, you have a better record. But also what you will be doing is that you will be aligned with the new intellectual property rights. So you are not using the material that was bred in 1920, but we are actually aligned with the times, aligned with the change of weathers, aligned with what is currently happening out there. So you are using the material that is actually protected. The third one that I also want to say is that when these materials are carefully selected, they can also be suitable for domestic circumstances, wherein the smallholder farmers will actually get incentives, because now your books are going to look good because you have these new technologies. You know that in your country, you can actually go and ask for new developed varieties. When you want to diversify, you don't diversify with old material that is out of PBR, but you are diversifying with the material that has a PBR. You have a trademark on your products, and with that trademark, you can actually license it out as well to the other farmers so that you can also generate income. But all in general, when we consider the issues around the agri-financing or the barriers, we also need to be thinking about how can we improve on such, how can we make sure that we bring in innovations that will attract the funders, innovations that would make our books look good, and we can attract investors, or we can attract funding that would assist us, that would boost our financials. And with that, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia. Thank you for that. We really appreciate it and very insightful. I think it's very important, to consider the intellectual property thereof. So thank you for your insight and sharing that with us. We really do appreciate it. So thank you. I think we're going to move on then just for time purposes. And then if there is some questions that pops up, we will definitely answer them at the end of our questions and answers. All right, so let's move on to our second speaker. So now we're going to go on to our journey to investment readiness. And I think some of the questions will definitely be answered with the next presentation. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Pastor Chikaoneka. He's an investment ecosystem development manager at Renew Capital. Pastor supports the establishment of the company's presence in Malawi through the engagement of investment and development ecosystem actors and the management and execution of private sector consulting and development projects. So that being said, Pastor, thank you so much for being here. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say in terms of funding, getting ready for investment ready. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Botha. So as introduced, my name is Pastor Chikaoneka. I am currently based in Malawi, and I want to talk to you about the journey of getting to investment readiness as a supplement and complement to the presentation made by Titiana initially, and also some of the points raised most recently by Dr. Moti. So what I'd like to, if we can move to the next slide, please. So what I'm hoping we can do by the end of this session is to have provided you with an overview of some of the types of capital available to you and your business, and then when you can consider pursuing these types of different options. And the outcome from that is hopefully that you should be able to understand the different ways in which you can potentially finance your business and what investors might be looking for and not like, right? So one of the things that I will also do throughout this presentation is ground our conversation in the way that Renew Capital operates, as well as some of some broader knowledge and resources that might help you also make these decisions about the funding and financing that you need. And the reason for that is because we are actively always looking for investments to make in different sectors in sub-Saharan Africa, primarily focusing on climate adaptation, gender smart and climate smart businesses. So hoping that you can get a balanced view of some of the options that are there for you. Next slide, please. Right, yeah. So in terms of if you think about some of the situations of the African continent, right? We believe that there's a lot of potential in what we call the missing middle and the missing management, right? So Africa itself needs about 8 million jobs every year, right? And SMEs have proven themselves to be engines of this job growth, right? But what tends to happen is that there are certain SMEs that find themselves trapped in the missing middle. So what we mean by this is that you might find that when you started a business, you have kind of exhausted the baseline of the microfinance, and the initial resources that you had that were financing your business might have dried out and not there anymore, right? Or you might start thinking about, okay, how can I access financing from banks? And then that might not necessarily be giving you as much joy as you're looking for. And then at the same time, you've got this management gap where, you know, as CEOs, managers, founders, you're doing all this hard work, putting in the right work into your business, but you're not seeing the kind of growth that you're hoping for, right? So this is where we see Renew Capital's role. Next slide, please. So right now we are in 15 countries in Africa, right? If I can quickly list them, there's Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zambia, Sudan, Ghana, South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Senegal, Nigeria, and Malawi, right? But what is the same, or what is something that is important in all of these localities is that we take an approach where we believe that the first step to making the right types of investments in high growth SMEs and different types of sectors, including agribusiness, which we're focusing on today, is to be able to contribute towards significant and long-term impact ecosystem building. So what this means is we have various levels of interventions in those various ecosystems where we provide training, mentorship, and network building. And then from that, that should be able to position businesses who are positioned themselves for high growth and scale to be able to have access to our accelerator funds, which are essentially a combination of angel investment and blended finance, which usually starts in the range of $50,000 US to $500,000 US. And the aspiration from there is that as time progresses and there's growth and scale in the business, then you are able, maybe after an 18-month runway, able to also potentially have access to follow-on funding to help you scale your business further. So this is in correspondence to being able to addressing the capacity needs for strengthening and access to finance in that missing middle. Next slide, please. So if you're now a business looking for capital, next slide, please. It is, I think if you, from Titian's presentation initially, you know, she said something really interesting around, you don't necessarily need to know each of these as in trying to understand this is the type of capital I'm looking for, but being able to know your needs will be able to, you can be able to correspond your needs as well to the types of capital that you can find for your business. So I think for our purposes here, I would like to identify 3 types of capital that you could get for your businesses, right? So firstly, in terms of grant financing, right? So grant financing, the source of grant financing is usually important in the initial stages, and it comes aligned to certain impact standards, right? And we find that these grants are provided by philanthropic people, organizations, and development partners. And some people think of grants as free money, but I think, you know, when you delve deeper into it, each of these types of capital has its own requirements. Second type of capital is debt capital, and this could be coming from banks, microfinance institutions, as well as private lenders. And we can, you know, think about a distinction between bank debt and private debt. But the correlation is that this usually comes at an interest rate and a required collateral item. And the interest rate is usually priced as a function of the cost of capital as well as the risk margin. And then in the third category, we can look at equity capital. So this can be from venture capitals, it can be from private equity, it can be from development finance institutions, as well as public stock markets. And this involves the sale of shares to the investor in exchange for capital. And this is considered the riskiest type of investing. So it requires the best returns. Next slide, please. So knowing this, what do you need to be thinking about in terms of the different types of capital and which one is best for you? So I think it's really important to be able to think about these different areas to try and see what is the best fit of type of capital for you. So one of these areas, for example, is the stage of your business, right? So whether you're at early stage or you see yourself at a stable or mature stage, or you're in multiple stages, this has a bearing on the type of capital that might be ideal for you at that specific stage. Important to look at is also the requirements for the type of capital, right? Is it impact-based? What type of impact are they focusing on? Does it require certain types of collateral? How important is our corporate governance in our businesses for us to be able to access a specific type of capital? Then thinking about the type of business that you have could also be useful in thinking about which type of capital you would be ideal for your business. Another equally important characteristic is the cost. What is the cost to our business for us to be able to access this capital? Is it free? Are we what is the type of percentage of repayments that might be required from us? What is the risk profile, and how do we account for that in the growth that we are projecting for our businesses? And likewise, you can look at the sector that you're in, and the type of financing that you might require based on the appetite that the different suppliers of that capital might have for different sectors. And then the same can be said for strategy in terms of, you know, what are some of the risks that you can consider? What are the return requirements? And also in terms of requirements and obligations, what are the reporting requirements, repayments, and how and what type of agreements or negotiations might we need to make in terms of controls of shares and things like that? Next slide, please. So when you think about then having moved from the step of thinking about the type of capital that are there and which might be best for you, something that's really important is to think about the trajectory of growth that could happen in your business based on the source of cash or capital that you have. So if I try to summarize the model that you see in front of you there very quickly, essentially, here's your business, you have your inputs, it could be your raw materials, then you input those into your operations, and you do some value addition, you have your outputs, you have a product to sell. Once that product has been sold, you're able to collect money, but you have operational expenses that exist in the business, and then you have your profit at the end of it. So this is a simplified structure of how you can internally generate cash within your business. Now, part of the challenge here is that, let's say on average, maybe businesses can take 12 to 18 months to get to profitability once they have an MVP established, and maybe sooner, right? But for you to grow and scale fast, you need to be able to think about how much quicker external capital can get you there. So, for example, let's say your internal cash generation is 20,000 and you want to buy a machine that's worth 200,000. And if you think about it, do you have a 10-year runway in order to be able to get that machinery to help yourself grow? Probably not, right? So external capital is a way of being able to grow and scale quicker. And usually this could be looking at giving you an 18-month of a runway of burn to be able to get to a sustainable level of cash flow, which will buy you enough time to raise more capital. Next slide, please. Right. So when you think about suiting for an investor, I think one of the things to think about it is in terms of a marathon, but you also have to be able to get to your destination a lot quicker than a lot quicker, because it can become an exhausting process, right? So next slide, please. So one of the ways in which to think about the investment or the investor or financier that you end up choosing is to think of it in terms of a marriage, right? So when people consider getting married to each other, you have to make considerations around what are this person's values, where do they want to go, what do we understand about the way we operate, how are we planning on getting there together? And even though we come from different places, we're all working towards the same thing. And how do we make sure that we synchronize in this process? So if you move on to the next slide, please. What then has become clear to us as Renew Capital over the years is that it's the mindset that counts for the business's success, right? So at Renew Capital, this is what we work really hard to find, right? So we look at, are the people that we are looking to invest in, what type of mindsets do they have? Do they have a growth mindset? Do they have a fixed mindset? So do you think of your business as something scalable? Do you have a big vision? Are you doing this business simply because someone else is doing it? Are you in this business simply because it's something that's in vogue? Being able to find the right mindset is something really exceptional, and it leverages you to be able to really scale and grow your business with the right type of investment for the growth of your business if you have the right type of mindset. Next slide, please. So in closing, to kind of bring this full circle. So as an organization, Renew Capital, we are constantly actively looking for deals and investments to make in the territories that we're in, but also those that we are not, and looking to expand the investments that we can make. So what we generally look for is we look at the team. Is the team led by a strong leader? Are they coachable, scalable, trustworthy, right? We look at traction. Do you understand your revenues? Do you know your key growth indicators? Do you understand the market that you're in? Does your product fit? Are you positioned to scale rapidly? Do you have a competitive advantage? Do you fit in the brackets of the investment, the initial investment round that we're looking for, so that you can give yourself some runway to profitability and be able to make leeway with conservative forecasts? Are you not overly dependent on imported raw materials? Can you scale? And most importantly for an investor is how significantly could you increase the value of the investment that is made into you? Next slide, please. So I think in closing, I would like to just end by saying, in terms of trying to decide which type of investment is best for you, it's always good to keep in mind that different investors provide different types of capital and services, but you need to know what you need. And when you know what you need, then you will be able to take all the other areas that we have mentioned into account and be able to identify the right type of investment for you. So in closing, be able to assess all of these situations and get into the right type of marriage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, I don't actually know where to start. I think it was an absolute wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Very, very insightful. I think there's so much information, I think everyone's making notes and trying to keep up with it. So thank you for that. I think it's really important, like you say, how do you grow your business, or how do you get external capital? What type of capital is important? So it's really to know your business. I think it's very important to know what is your needs, where do you want to go, and kind of then to see for which fund should you apply for, because there's so many different types. And I think it's also sometimes we don't even know about these different types of funding, what's available and what really works for my business. So there is a few questions. So I think the first one, you kind of touched on it a bit, is what are the top funds for small scale agribusiness startups in South Africa? So I know it's South African specific. Then are there funding bodies focusing on industrial hemp trial project models? I don't know if you would be able to answer that. So that's the two. And then are there tools to help one track your productivity or finances that a startup farmer can adopt, or do you have to formulate your own? And then the last one is then, do you perhaps have some links to share in terms of angel investors in agribusiness that we can have a look at? So I
All
think
right. Yeah, no, thank you very much, Dr. Botha. Right, so the first one on the specific type of funds that are available there, I think this depends on the different type of locations that you're in, right? So I may not be able to necessarily list all the top funds that are there in South Africa, but I think the most important thing in terms of being able to really tap into the existing support that is there for being able to grow your businesses and understand the tools that are available for you is to be an active part of these entrepreneurship support ecosystems, right? So if you look across the continent, there are vibrant entrepreneurship support ecosystems that are happening where you have incubators, you have accelerators, you have funds, you have funds, you have angel investing networks, etc. So I think really being able to be an active member of these different enterprise support ecosystems is key to being able to get a lot of this knowledge. And I would like to point out that I think the same would apply for in terms of tools to adopt, right? So for example, depending on the level, the type of stage of business that you are. So for example, if you get into an incubator, the type of support that they give you there is things like, being able to help you set up monitoring tools to be able to track your finances. And as you grow from stage to stage, as your business is growing, then the complexity of the tools and support that they provide you also progresses along with that. So I think it's also being able to know which of these different points of intervention are able to provide you the resources that you need to position you for growth at that specific point in time. And as for links to various angel investors, sure, I'd be happy to share some resources beyond the call. But also, I think just to point out that, so for example, at Renew Capital, we have an angel investor network of over 200, right? So we have an angel investor network where the private investing that we're making is a pool of funds from different angel investors. So that also allows us to be able to kind of be flexible into the types of investments that we can make. But would be happy to share other links beyond the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's one more question. You mentioned about 18 months. Is that your turnaround period to profitability? What about those with longer gestation period?
That is a great question. It is not necessarily the turnaround period for profitability, but what we have seen in the past is that the investments that have yielded the best returns have been able to use their initial round of investment to be able to give themselves a 18-month at least minimum or average runway, so that by the time they get to that point, then they might find themselves at a stage of being able to be looking to absorb the follow-on round of funding. But it is possible that your business can have a longer gestation period, and that is not something that is necessarily a negative thing. I think it's also about being able to be realistic about the forecasts and maybe changes in your operating environment, etc., and then to factor these in as we look at the performance of the business going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pastor. Really, thank you. So yes, I think let's move on to the third speaker. Once again, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. I think everyone, as I said, they just will make sure they can access the recording to reflect again on that. So thank you so much. If there's any other questions, please do put it in the question and answer section, and then we can also address it at the end. All right, then I would like to introduce our final speaker for today. So we're going to continue on topic, but specifically looking at, accessing funding. So I'm pleased to introduce Avisha Singh. She is an independent customer strategist with 25 years of experience working for retail banks, insurers, and asset managers. She has specialized in customer segmentation and profiling, data synthesis, and application of customer-level strategic intelligence. So without further ado, thank you so much, Avisha. We're really looking forward to your presentation, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this platform, and especially thank you to both Tatiana and Posta. They've made my job very easy. I appreciate that introduction. I have to say, when we do bios, it's always a toss-up as to what to put forward. So in the spirit of keeping things real, one of my best learnings have actually come from my failures. I've attempted, in as much as I've lived in the corporate world, it shouldn't surprise anyone that comes from this world that it also has uncertainty, it also has twists and turns. And funnily enough, even the corporate world also looks for gaps in the market and leverages it, which is mainly why I am speaking here today. So in terms of the truth, yes, those who fail at it must learn more. So I'm currently studying a master's in entrepreneurship and innovation and hoping to serve for all our communities in South Africa much better and expanded into the rest of Africa. While I might focus a lot on the metrics of what's going to come, listen in Posta's advice with an open mindset. Some of it is not going to surprise you, but a lot of it, I do speak about things that have not hit the South African market in particular as yet. So without much further ado, if someone can just signal if the slide has moved. All right, there we go.
There we go.
When Posta was speaking about the journey as to where you are in the milestones and even the questions that have come up as to what's in a reasonable time, the concept that we are setting with agripreneurship is cusping two different worlds. One where South Africa in particular, and most jurisdictions that I've seen in Africa, take the traditional approach of early stage startup, growth, establish, mature. And they usually take ages of businesses into it. So I want you to look in keeping with understanding yourself, your motivations, and your personal journey as an entrepreneur. Where are you in that life cycle? As opposed to conflating it with, as an agripreneur, much more is taken into account, as Posta just described. From the very inception of your idea, all the way up through you testing your product market fit and hitting your cash break-even milestones, all the way to profitability and expansion. Today, because of the concept of entrepreneurship in the modern sense, the support organizations have actually orientated to be there for you at every stage and milestone of this journey. But if I might ask you, go back to the top section, the MSC life cycle. Why is this happening? To Tatiana's point, it's because there's profitability in it. So it doesn't matter what nature of your business is. If you are in this ecosystem, you are contributing, for example, in the South African context, regardless of what stage you are in, or even whether you are formal or informal, in the trillions to the South African economy right now. So, does it take money to have money? This would suggest, yes, there is money there already. But my topic is, why are there barriers to accessing finance and funding? So I'm not sure if I agree with the concept, but let's take the advice of these old overthinkers and delve a little bit into this. What is happening today? So bear in mind, I'm speaking now of two worlds that we are living in. On the left-hand side, it's a depiction of the value chain you are all very familiar with. In fact, many of our audience are playing some role in this value chain, starting from whether you are an actual producer and farmer, transport or logistics, and food producer, manufacturing, and so on. And because of the sectoral view that you are seen in, this is how you're traditionally viewed. So when you are getting directed for support, whether it's financial or non-financial, you're viewed in these hard-coded blocks because that's how the system is. But from what both our prior speakers have been speaking about and the advice of ecosystems, it's become more than theoretical models or the informal ways in which we source help and ecos and networks. This is actually how we're working. In fact, this very moment, we are belonging to one that looks very much like the picture on the right. We've got public sector funders, researchers, centers of excellence, whether it's your incubation hubs and accelerators. And why is this happening? It did not happen out of a top-down approach to business. It's because the sector that we are speaking in, from agripreneurship, represents the top 3 focuses of funding right now. So on the topic of access to barriers or lack of funding, I think we can all agree that the intent is there. So why do we still have a gap in the finance market? So I did a quick search, and I believe it was a South African that just asked who are the players in the market. I'm going to share this. I have found more than 200 support organizations in what they call the ecosystem. About 197 of them are pure funding sources, private sector, global funds, regional funds, places where I consult to, like IFC and World Bank, are in this mix. However, local research in South Africa says that less than 7%, less than 6% actually have a combination of grants, business loans, and personal loans. Now, getting further into the micro enterprise world, the smaller operators, we're talking about 150 township entrepreneurship support organizations. Yet, when you speak from demand-side research in South Africa, about half are even aware of this. 20% claim to use it. And yes, it gets even worse when it comes to the joining of memberships, which is highly recommended in the agripreneur world. Now, the question again from a South African, who are the ones in the South African market? I will share these links. Why is there a perception that there isn't funding, and why are there so few of our agripreneurs that actually have actually taken on this funding? Well, I can say from the task that I set a challenge to myself, pretending as though I wanted government funding. This was the hardest thing I've had to do in a while. It was not easy, but I did manage to find 40 options for South Africans across sectors. Now, if you have to look at the side with the list that's sitting there, academic researchers, agriculture, feasibility projects, it mimics the ecosystem I just showed you. So this is real life now and what's available. Now, are they all applicable to a small startup or a smaller to medium or micro enterprise? Probably not. However, they're all structured in order to create a cohesive network. So I think it's mentioned already, what I found is there are various forms of financing options, not just grants. One of the 2 most popular, though, are the cost-sharing grants and the blended finance options. My first instinct, not being too familiar with this world, was blended finance, in my experience from the corporate world, are for these huge deal structures. Not true. I then looked at every one of these 40 and tried to map it, not very scientifically. I would need to actually speak to these people personally, because there are a lot of misconceptions about what's available and what isn't. I divided into needs. So the low, medium, highs that you're seeing there speak to your need as an entrepreneur, agripreneur. So do you need a small grant? Do you need medium? And it ranges. My first instinct, very negatively, was this is going to be for big business. It's actually not. As an example, I selected the 9 that appeal to low. I have the links and contact details for this, which I will share. So I won't go into so much detail in this, but I just have to note that one of the biggest players right now is CIFA with their township entrepreneur projects. It ranges from the most minimal, from 2,000 all the way up to what you would need in more formalized setups for more sustainable businesses. So this is not merely just for the rich or big businesses. What I do have to note, though, that's when I look at demand-side research and having gone through this experience myself, these are not easy to find and people are not aware of it. So that is the government side of it. The question is, what happens with bank access? So as beneficial and as available as these government funds are, sometimes the need is more urgent, especially when it comes to working capital needs. And banks, for the most part, are very responsive to that, except for micro enterprises. That is where, whether we want to call it the middle mark or the gap mark that Pastor referred to, this is where a lot of the funding gap, funding deficit exists. So let's look at it from the bank side. So it is not just an aversion to risk, although that is one of the biggest ones. Tetian did mention record keeping. It is not a punitive measure. It's how the system works right now. So it is, whether you have collateral or not, the business performance is something that any lender will look at primarily to mitigate their own risk and to match you with the right product. And of course, there is also the fact that most banks and financial advisors will tell you not to mix your personal expenditure with your business expenditure. Now, as medium or small enterprises, I think there's a different reality that exists in your world. So what are some of the top 5 reasons as to why micro enterprises or small businesses themselves are actually averse sometimes to bank credit? And let's leave out prior bad experience. The truth is, in the African market, and I don't think it's limited to just us, Latin America has similar behaviors. Cash remains king. So even if you are a formal business, most of your transactions do lie outside of a traceable or trackable system. Uncertainty, more especially in the agri sector, is about cash flow. So there's this fear about being able to pay back a fixed installment. And the other side of that coin is being dependent on debt for a longer period, a debt trap. No or poor record and credit history, we've discussed that already. And one of the truths that the system is waking up to is that most business income is indeed family income. And it doesn't matter on what income level you're sitting at, it is a ubiquitous thing with self-employed and entrepreneurs. Family expenses is part of business life. And then, of course, it is expensive. Bank credit is not a cheap debt to hold. It's an efficiently provided one, however. Now, added to the insights that we look at what's happening in reality, there are some things that are already starting to become noticed in the financial sector. Is that when you hear words like crowdfunding, and it sounds new, and a lot of people, when you use that words, will not resonate. But in fact, Africans have been doing this for generations. Statistically, you're seeing the numbers I'm showing, that friends and family, spouses, stokvel, saving clubs are a huge part of our savings behaviors that go into funding businesses. Some of the non-social capital elements, and very admirable, are self-funded initiatives. So whether it's your own savings, salaries, or from business partners, all go into your credit identity. Now, why? What is changing? Because as much as I'm looking at this as such a favorable thing, the gap remains. What is changing is that digital finance is changing the way lending is viewed for micro and small enterprises globally. Digital tools, you might have heard of them already, alternative payments, is taking far more than just your business activity. Your household activity now becomes a part of the way you are viewed for scoring. That includes your household utilities and prepaid expenses. Alternative scores can also take the form of scraping your Facebook data. Crowdfunding, as I've mentioned already, is becoming digitized. Now, I have to admit, a lot of my non-digital examples are from East Africa that I've observed and worked with as a course of World Bank work. Rwanda, one of the providers there, in fact, more than one, asks for letters from a healthy savings club and immediately will put you into a good credit mechanism. South Africans, can you imagine if they used our stokvel data for that? In Kenya, good household management, including keeping school fees paid on time for the children, goes into the business assessment. And lots of time is taken to look at both the household and the business as a whole. In Uganda, what we observed with a few providers is a one-day market loan, because the women in the market simply just need the money for the stock, and she pays it by that afternoon. She's actually very risk averse for debt, and this goes into good behavioral scoring. In terms of current digital South African behavior, we have to be optimistic with these changes because they happen very quickly. COVID had a lot to do with it, but this pattern has been sustainable. One of the most interesting ones to link in with our other speakers is, yes, financial records are a problem, but we've got 60% that are keeping good records. What you should concentrate on is, out of that, the 81% who've had a pattern of good record keeping said that it helped them with credit today. What I find most exciting is we always talk about digitization, and I come from the corporate world where it's these big systems and big marketing companies. Well, social media has changed that. Look at those figures of social media being used for business. In fact, on a personal level, I think it's happening throughout Africa. So much of the WhatsApp groups put their catalogs up, and this is how small and micro enterprises are now marketing themselves and opening themselves. In fact, the very business models that you're operating in are changing. So in terms of these changes, what advice can I give from these observations and experiences? I resonate 100% with my first point and previous speakers. Join an ecosystem. The ecosystem is not simply going for a training course, leaving it and doing a tick box. Join a collaborative ecosystem that makes sense for the life stage of your business. From consortiums that I've been speaking with as a course of my research, don't be negative about government funding. A lot is said, but from the experiences that I've heard, I'll narrate one if I have time. She applied within a consortium of 8 to land bank reform. The next day, there was a surprise visit to verify the land existed. The day after that, all the members were verified. The day of 2 days after that, the money was transferred into the account. So things are shaping up, South Africans. Join the right consortium, though. Make sure that your goals are aligned. Be very intentional about what you think is simply posting. Be intentional with your WhatsApp and Facebook marketing, connecting it to the point that someday digital lenders, if not far in the future, will be looking at that behavior to score you better. Now, in as much as you can, use as many digital payments as you can today. If you're worried about it, go for the training. It's available to you. Maintain the records of your self-funding. Do not think that it's ad hoc or bootstrapping and it doesn't account for it. Pastor can maybe speak more about the perception that when somebody says, I managed to get from idea to startup and I self-funded it and people had faith in me, it's a good reputation you build from day one. And pool the records for your multiple activities. My research is showing that South Africans in particular have about 3 or 4 activities. Don't look at them in isolation, because in the digital environment, you will be looked at as a whole. Ironically, it would appear that digital data cares more about you as a human. I think we need another session or better experts to guide you on these alternative credit scoring models, and certainly to share navigating the existing funding landscape from the government funds, because they are there. I wish everyone luck and hope to meet and learn more.
Thank you so much, Avisha. Really, thank you for that. I feel like you've really brought everything together so nicely. So thank you for that. And I think really there's a lot, and I don't know about everyone joining, but there's a lot that we can take home today. And I think we'll definitely have to check the recording again, make notes, because there was really, I felt like it was information overload, but that was really necessary. I mean, we started off by looking at tackling the challenges, understand your business model, you know, how do you make money, really know what is your needs for your business. And then I think all 3 of the speakers mentioned, you know, that you need to leverage your mentors, those with experience, join that ecosystem. And I think it's important to know that even though you might feel like you're alone, you're not alone. You really need to start developing that network. I think that's really important. Document everything. Avisha, you've also mentioned that, you know, keeping record of that, that's important. And then really, Pastor, I mean, you looked at the types of funding, understand your needs as a business, understand what is best for your business. So I think it's also about creating knowledge or generating that knowledge to say, okay, this is the funding that's out there, this is my business, and kind of see how do I map the two together. And it's not always easy to do that, but at least we've got a starting point. Look at the criteria. Obviously, we've looked at some of the criteria that Pastor, you guys are using, but wherever you're applying for funding, to understand that criteria and work through the criteria from the start. So I think that's really important. And then Avisha, when I looked at your slide and looking at the funding that's available, public sector funding, I was sitting there and the first thing that, and I'm saying because I'm an educator, students says, yes, but there's not government funding. There's really a lot. It's once again knowing what is out there, what is suitable for my business, where do I go, how do I approach it? And you've really summarized it quite nice to exactly give a breakdown for that. So thank you for that. That for me personally was very useful. And really, it's about understanding the challenges from the side of the banks or the funders, why they don't necessarily always give out funding, how that disconnect, like you said, the disconnect between the banks and the SMEs, and how we can bridge that gap. I think that's really important. So, I've only touched on a few things because I'm not a speaker. I want to open up for questions. So I think I first want to thank our three speakers, really, and Dr. Cynthia, you as well. Thank you for your insights. We really appreciate it. And you could see on the chat, everyone is really taking part and notes and thinking about, what is the next step for my business. So I'm going to open up the floor for some questions. We do have a bit of time. So I'm just checking here. So I'm specifically, Dr. Cynthia, there was a question for you. So I'm going to read the question if you would be so kind to see if you can answer it. So if a business is only registered as a sole proprietor and has the necessary IP rights, sorry, I lost my thought there, necessary IP rights like trademarks, if this business is not incorporated LTD, depending on the source of financing, how can this affect funding of the business? So if you're a sole proprietor, you've got the necessary IP rights, you're not an incorporated business, how could that affect your funding? Dr. Cynthia, you can maybe share your thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. The sole proprietor rights won't affect the IP rights. So if there's a trademark that needs to be registered, the trade in the sole proprietor, or it can be registered under the owner, and then the owner can then license it out to the company. So then it can be used to say, I own this company, but the trademark is under my name. So it's been licensed to the company. So it won't affect, then it builds the assets of the company. So that's how it can be dealt with, or how it can be incorporated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cynthia, for that. I hope that I've answered your question. And I think there was also just not necessarily a question, but there was a comment made, and I want to open it up to our speakers, is saying, it's everything, it's been a nice moment. However, it's important to disseminate technologies which are friendly to the youth and people with disabilities. I think, Avisha, you've kind of touched on, the digital technologies and that, but I want to open the floor maybe for comments on, or thoughts on that comment. Avisha, I don't know if we can maybe start with you.
I can potentially refer to two examples. So forgive me, I've forgotten the name, but under the CIFA, there's a specific program for people with disabilities. I have to admit, I didn't look at it in detail, but it follows the similar structure that I suggested. Now, in terms of digital literacy, I can't really comment about the existing formats or curriculums of our digital lenders. Perhaps Dr. Botha, you can speak there, but from the private sector, what we're finding throughout Africa is the banks that I've got examples in my head from Rwanda right now, and maybe Titian can speak to. A lot of the training now that sits under what we would call maybe their corporate social responsibility is in partnership with the MNOs, because it's mutually beneficial to both. So digital training is taking on a much more practical, do this, and safety tips, because there's a lot of risk associated with it. So there is an evolution that is, I'm seeing more in Kenya and Rwanda than I have seen in South Africa. But the training programs do matter. The people with disabilities, the fund is there. As to how effective they are and how many people do benefit from it, I don't really have that answer right now, but it is something I will be looking into over the next 3 months, so I can respond shortly.
No, thank you so much for that. Thank you, Avisha. Pastor, maybe anything, thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I think not much to add on my end, but just to concur with Avisha. I think what has become a lot more clearer to me is, if we look at, and again, I think it resonates with some of the things that we've all been discussing here. If we look at the role of impact versus, kind of just the returns aspect of business, I think what's becoming a lot more clearer is that in all these ecosystems that we're talking about, and I really love how Avisha really, kind of put this all together and explain, like, this is not a theoretical thing that is happening. There's this support that if you are consistent about it, you will be able to find the right things for you. And a lot of this support has become a lot more inclusive. So even here in Malawi, you find that, there's a lot more consideration for, how do we ensure that, things that were not necessarily reaching, people in the rural areas, how do we ensure that they are being served? How do we ensure that urban farmers, sometimes it's the other way around. Here you find that urban farmers are actually playing catch up with the knowledge that the people doing the farming in the rural areas have, so how do we ensure that there's this circular inclusiveness going on? So I think a really good point that, we need to be a lot more mindful and proactive and consistent about this this level of inclusion, whether that be with disabilities and any other impediments that might be there. So just to concur with Avisha there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor. Then there's one last question that I see, and I think it's a very important question, is, how can one avoid being overwhelmed with playing all the roles? And, Tatiana's mentioned, in terms of you the marketer, you the HR specialist, the IT specialist, you're doing the finances, the accounting, and kind of when you go and approach for funding, if someone asks you a question, you kind of need to know everything. So you're playing multiple roles. So how can you avoid being overwhelmed? Perhaps maybe just some general advice to our audience. I don't know, Pastor Avisha, Dr. Cynthia, you can also jump in here. I don't know who wants to go first. Pastor, let's go with you.
No, I mean, I can just go quickly. Yeah, I think my quick advice would be, I think one of the things that we've been exploring is, if you look at, for example, I mean, I can give an example of Malawian ecosystem where I think there's been a proactive shift from business or entrepreneurship because I have nothing else to do, for lack of a better term, versus this is an actual choice that I'm making, that I know the impact of what it is I can develop for other people if I go full on in this, right? So what that going full on into this business as your first choice means is that you have to be a lot more deliberate about the corporate governance structures that you have within your business, right? So you need to be able to know that, not everyone can serve every function. Yes, the founder, you've got their strength. You need someone to be able to focus on finances. You need someone to be able to focus on the market. You need someone to be able to focus on, the different value chains that keep your business running. So I think being able to have the mindset for growth from when the business is being established, I think is a good benchmark for being able to have a blueprint for the different types of differentiation of roles and responsibilities that you might need within the business. And you can't have all the roles at the same time, but there can be, I think, really structured ways of being able to separate these responsibilities.
Thank you so much for that. Avisha, any thoughts from your side?
perhaps just responding to the sole proprietors, you know, the one-man shows that are in their idea state. Unfortunately, it does rest on you. So the only advice I can say from personal experience and from observing from working in incubators and accelerators is authenticity goes a long way. And I'm not just speaking about honesty of your financial modeling and your predictions, but I think most intelligent ecosystems and funders do know we all come from different angles. So personally, I come from an analyst background. So marketing is not my strong suit. Be open about that, but bring it back to your core skill, which is more than core skill. What Pastor is saying is your true intent. In the social entrepreneurship world, know your audience. I'm not saying change your storyline, but when you're talking to social entrepreneurs versus for-profit, understand that their motivations are very different from each other. So you have to have pitch decks and narratives that speak to both. So I'm not actually solving a problem. I'm saying more than core skill, you need to adopt many hats and upskill. I suppose this is why I'm studying it. Upskill from each other. The mentorship programs are here for you.
No, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. All right, I'm having my look at, I'm looking at the time and I see it's past. So I think let us wrap up. I'm just going to introduce Chifaniro, who will do the closure for us. So Chifaniro is a farmer and development entrepreneurship catalyst and advocate with 12 years of experience designing and implementing community-based development projects, green enterprise curricular development, and building strategic partnerships for economic transformation of communities. Chifaniro, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a wonderful webinar we had today. And Dr. Shante, just amazing. Poster, Dr. Titen, Dr. Cynthia, and Avisha. This is just an amazing webinar, just amazing. Thanks, everyone, and thanks all the participants. Now, where are we moving from here? What next? We have observed the questions and we have seen that there is an appetite for more knowledge, more especially in today's session. Our next step is we'll develop these sessions into short trainings. I believe you would love to take what Poster presented as a short training. So that will be the next steps. And somebody may say, but how will it be delivered? Avisha's last point in presentation, she just mentioned, she just shared a tip on the role of digital transformation. So what next? We'll take these presentations and upload them on a digital transformation. Last webinar, Stephen Gabriel presented about Moja. So we'll put all the presentations on Moja platform and you'll be able to take them. What an opportunity. What an opportunity. So you can take these short trainings in the comfort of your homes anytime, and you'll be able to apply these principles and improve your businesses. And the other thing is after this presentation, we'll share kind of a baseline, we should call it that way, a survey. And we want to find out there are some interested partners who'd love to screen some entrepreneurs so that they can be exposed to some sort of funding opportunities. So whenever you have been reached to say we are requiring such kind of information, please don't hesitate. You may be the next person to get funding, so don't hesitate. And reaching this far, thank you, everybody. Next year, we are coming up with other series of webinars, I think 2 more, and then we'll go into short trainings. We have noticed there are some questions here that cannot be answered through a webinar. They can be answered through a short training or a short course. So we want to invite you to be part of the journey. We have got a WhatsApp forum. If you're not there, please be part of it. We'll be sharing insights, opportunities on that forum, and it will be interactive. Early next year, likely late January, we're coming up with another webinar, a wonderful one, a wonderful webinar. You don't need to miss that one. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Bye-bye. Thank you.